The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with the New Society, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, we have Leah Fletcher. Leah is founder of Arbutus Innovation Centre and Didanu Wellness, which are two cannabis businesses based in Ireland, which we'll find out a bit more about in a second. Welcome, Leah. How are you?
Great. Thanks a million for having me.
No, really glad to have you on the show. We've got a few things to talk about today, but why don't we start with the usual place and tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into the cannabis industry? What you did before, etc.?
Yeah, I accidentally ended up in the cannabis industry. It's not something I had planned or envisaged. It was just one of these things. I was actually an educator in Canada for about 7 years, and previously to that I was working in Ireland. I started slowly doing some consultancy work for different companies. My interest was in patient access, and particularly patient access in my home country, in Ireland. I saw the Canadian industry start to take off and recognise that people in Canada had access to cannabis. Meanwhile, over in Ireland, there were very sick children with particular diseases that weren't able to access various types of cannabis and cannabinoids. So I started doing some patient advocacy and lobbying work in Ireland, flying back and forth from Vancouver to Dublin, met with a number of ministers and politicians and senators to discuss cannabis, realised then that needed to get involved kind of on the industry side of things to push it along. And the way that we saw that was through research, which is why we established the Innovation Centre in Ireland. And that's the long and short of it.
Fantastic. And why don't you tell us a bit about Arbutus, and then you've got another business as well, haven't you?
So what we did was we went on the hunt for infrastructure and facilities in Ireland that would be able to accommodate research in the cannabis space. And we have put together systems and building in the centre of Ireland in a town called Athlone, where I'm from. It's a pharmaceutical building, GMP ready labs and manufacturing space, controlled drug licenses, and it's fairly agile, so it allows for us to take different projects under our roof and service them and expedite them, helping them get to market. And one of the projects that we have is actually my project, and a bit of my passion project is Didanu, which is hemp-focused cosmetics and low-input agriculture and circular manufacturing focus. So a lot going on, but they all help each other out.
Yeah, you are certainly very busy.
Yeah.
And how long has Didanu been going for? Or how long's Arbutus?
Yeah, so Arbutus was really born while we were still in Vancouver, and Vancouver as our base for a little while, just to get to know both jurisdictions and how we could support maybe Canadian and Americans trying to get into Europe. So a lot of networking, a lot of work in consulting for Canadian companies. We officially moved over and started working on our building a year ago. And at the same time, we started working on Didanu and working where we could in the cannabis space in Ireland, which was in hemp and hemp-derived products.
Yeah, cool. And can I ask where you got the name Didanu from?
Sure. Danu is an Irish goddess. And if you know Irish folklore, and we love our stories, and lots of gods and goddesses were born in Ireland, Danu is said to be the mother of all the gods and goddesses, and the mother of a group of warriors called Tuatha De Danann. And they were these really strong warriors. And she's said to have breastfed all the other gods and goddesses to life. So, Didanu means that we're family of Danu, that we kind of represent everything that she represents, respect for nature and respect for its plants and close relationship with the earth.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good starting point for us. And I think you mentioned, cosmetics is a key part of what you're doing.
Yeah. I'll just add that the reason we went into cosmetics was we wanted farmers in Ireland to be able to grow hemp. And when we looked at it, the regulatory issues were so vast. There was very narrow focus that you could actually work in. Hemp-derived oils and extracts were grey. Processing the flower for food was grey. But cosmetics, both from a regulatory standpoint and from consumer standpoint, seemed the most realistic way to go about things. Consumers in Ireland would be quite, for the most part, anti-cannabis and are only beginning to learn about its benefits. And we thought that looking at cosmetics and transdermal applications would be something that people could take a little bite off first.
And which is great. We can go on and talk about that stuff in a minute, actually, because I've done over 70 episodes now and we've never really covered cosmetics or topicals.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's well overdue to sort of have a bit of a 101 on this. So, and great to have you here to talk about that. And so maybe we just start very basically, what are the different types of sort of cannabis cosmetics and topicals that are available?
Yeah, well, we've seen anything from creams and lotions, oils, bath bombs, transdermal patches, personal lubricants. I've seen CBD treatments for eyelashes and eyebrows. Don't know how efficacious those are, but basically anything that you can put CBD in and have a carrier, I've seen on the market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. And shampoos is what I think I've seen.
I've seen, shampoos and conditioners in Main Street stores, actually. I've seen them in TK Maxx and places like that. I don't know the bioavailability of CBD in your shampoo or in a bath bomb for that matter, but they clearly sell. Yeah. And so, and how do they work? So obviously you put them on your skin. There's quite a lot of stuff to get through to get to your bloodstream. Yeah, well, earlier studies, from what we have researched, were showing that CBD doesn't absorb into your skin. But over the last number of years, they've recognized that transdermal administration, or putting it onto your skin or topically, it's actually at times can be better for bioavailability purposes. So it can avoid the first pass metabolism effect that's associated with taking oral cannabinoids. And what it does is transdermal application allows for a steady absorption of those cannabinoids into your system. Initially, it was thought that the CBD only sat on the skin and absorbed into the cells in the skin, but there is research out there showing that it does and can have a whole body effect, and therefore have, positive impact on people with arthritis, chronic pain, neuropathy. So it's very interesting. And the studies are starting to mount up and getting a bit more robust.
Yeah. And is localized delivery one of the kind of aims of it?
So both studies are shown, obviously, yes, localized applications are effective for the likes of acne, psoriasis, dermatitis, eczema. But we're also seeing studies and from our own research and from our own tests and our consumers that people are reporting to have, experience where their arthritis or inflammation is improved with this topical application. Wow. So it's quite interesting. We did, before we went down the road of investing in infrastructure and manufacturing and just throwing something on the market, we hired some skincare professionals and occupational therapists to look at our formulations. We then took 2 of our products. They were CBD-based salves, and we did case studies. So the first case study was and they were small, they're not as robust as we would like them to be, and we intend to build on those studies. But we took 20 people who suffered from psoriasis, and we followed them over an 8-week period. And we had an occupational therapist assess them before, during, and after that period of time, and the results were way better than we expected. I think we had 18 out of 20 of the psoriasis patients report that the psoriasis was at least 50% improved. And there's better figures than that the study can show. And then the other 20 people that we gave a product to, they were suffering from arthritis, and similar reports where they saw positive effect from using it. But what was most interesting to me was one or two of the psoriasis patients had arthritis and inflammation, and psoriasis and arthritis tend to go hand in hand. Those people reported that their arthritic or their inflammation from arthritis had improved because of the topical application for their psoriasis. So obviously very early studies and more would need to be done, but we were very happy with the results, and obviously those people are asking for the products again. So it's quite good.
Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Any other interesting things that came out of the study?
Yeah, what we noticed as well is the usual side effects that would be associated with topical treatments for psoriasis weren't noted. So patients would patients would have a steroid treatment, which actually thins the skin, and it can have adverse side effects. But from our small study, and I'll keep saying it was a small study, there weren't any side effects noted.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So they're two kind of different applications, I suppose, because the psoriasis and the skin issues are sort of, it's very much sort of on the surface, let's say. I'm sure there's stuff going underneath.
Yes.
But with arthritis and pain is obviously a little bit further deeper down, and it seems to be affecting both.
Yeah, it does. So obviously the cannabinoids are getting in there and having an influence and interacting with those receptors. And there are early studies to show that cannabinoids and the use of cannabis topically is interacting with non-cannabinoid receptors as well. So I suppose studies will show, and the more people that have access to these products, then we'll see people having positive reports. So it's quite exciting to be involved in it. But yeah, and if you looked at the other side of it, which is interesting, and it's starting to take off as well, which would be the beauty side of it. So for skincare, for, anti-wrinkle or, inflammation on the skin or anti-aging, though that's starting to be of interest to consumers as well. So there's kind of two ways to look at skincare and CBD and cannabinoids. Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of wellness versus medical, not versus, but two different.
Well, it's kind of, there's more the skincare beauty, there's the wellness, and then the medical would be another step. Like I've seen a couple of studies, for example, I think it's in the States, I've seen a study on, I think it's a rodent-based study where they measured the dosage, so the milligrams per dose that was applied, and they noted that there was positive effects at about 6.2 milligrams. And despite they upped the dose, got to 62 milligrams in this study, and it didn't show any extra benefits. So people are saying, I have 1,000 milligrams of CBD in my product, therefore it's better than the product that has 300 milligrams. That is not the case. And studies are showing that as well. Just because there's more doesn't mean it's going to be better. So there's studies out for that. There's studies out for topical applications, for medical applications for cancers, cannabidiol for cancers, glaucoma, and there's an early study in the States that's showing great results, preclinical, for epilepsy. So drug-resistant epilepsy, Dravet syndrome, topical application, and Fragile X syndrome as well. So there's a couple of preclinical studies that are showing, that they could go somewhere for those kind of diseases.
Wow, that is big. Wow, yeah, lots to go into there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, in terms of methods of delivery for topicals, obviously you aren't putting pure cannabinoids on there. So what sort of non-cannabis agents are you using to sort of assist the delivery or, help it get through the skin to the right places?
So for us, we're at Dodanu, we only use plant-based materials. So our carrier oils are either fractionated coconut oil, almond oils. We use beeswax as well, because beeswax is important to maintain stability of those products, but only plant-based. So we're trying not to use synthetic ingredients in our products. We also use herbal extracts and essential oils in some of our products. They may have similar therapeutic benefits to cannabinoids. So we try and match up our ingredients with what would support CBD and its efforts in helping your skin. Yeah, so it's for us, that's what we use, but there's obviously other things on the market, but generally it's products that are high in fat that would be able to carry those products and help them absorb into the system.
Right. Fantastic. And what is fractionated
coconut oil? So generally, when you see a CBD oil on the market, it's generally CBD, well, it can be CBD in fractionated coconut oil, and that's just a processed coconut oil. And it's high in fats. So because it's high in fat, it helps the CBD absorb into your system. Mm-hmm. And it's often it's used in many skincare products. You can buy it over the counter just as a food, fractionated coconut oil. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think you talked about some of the ailments it's used for. So, I was quite surprised that you said that epilepsy is one of them. I suppose you talked about it at the beginning, when you were looking at various things, and this area was more interesting because it's slightly different regulatory issues. And I suppose that's because you're not ingesting it, which I suppose the authorities deem as sort of a higher risk area, or one that they don't understand fully. What are the ones surrounding cosmetics and skincare?
Yeah, it's a different framework to the food. Obviously, cosmetics manufacturers don't have to report to the European Food Safety, or here it's the Food Safety Authority. But there's some issues and there's some difficulties in the supply chain. But I'll work backwards. So to register a product in Europe, you need to go onto a European database for cosmetics. And what's happened over the last number of years is things have chopped and changed. You haven't been allowed to do something and then you're allowed to do it and then you haven't been allowed again. So it's quite difficult from a cosmetic standpoint because your formulations are important and you put a lot of work into your formulations and a lot of testing and stability testing. So for them to change what kind of type of ingredient you can use is quite challenging. So you have to register on that database. And what happened this year is there was finally some clarification on what exactly we could use or couldn't use with regards to cannabis and hemp and cannabinoids. So right now there is a framework in place for cosmetic manufacturers and formulators to use, and it's quite straightforward at this point. But as you work your way back through the supply chain, that's where there may be issues. So in order to obtain European cannabinoids that are extracted in Europe, it can be quite difficult. There's difficulty from a farmer's standpoint. Ideally, we want to be sourcing our product in Ireland because we want to be using less carbon. We don't want to be importing bulk materials across oceans to get here. So there still needs to be some regulatory work done at a European level for European companies to be able to use European ingredients. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff going on around. What's happening on a European regulatory level.
Yeah.
And what are potential safety concerns around this?
Well, around CBD use, safety concerns in skincare would be the same as any other safety concern in a cosmetic or a topical. Generally in Europe, the standard is that all of your products have to be notified on a European database. Your products need to be uploaded into that database. You need to have your manufacturing processes in place, and your manufacturing should be to GMP standard. You should have your batches, you should have recall procedures, you need to have safety data sheets for all your ingredients, and everything needs to be filed and monitored. So the safety issue would be the same as any other cosmetic, in that you need to follow those procedures to make sure that any consumer is able to go back to that company and be assured that everything was put together safely and with the correct processes in place. With regards safety of CBD topically, studies are showing that there aren't any adverse side effects to using that topically. In fact, the studies are showing that there's side benefits to having CBD. So you might use CBD, as I said, for your psoriasis, and maybe the pain in your knee could go away. Who knows?
And is it likely to be, a topical is going to be affected by the potential designation as a narcotic by Commission?
So interestingly, no. Initially, they had said CBD couldn't be used in Europe on cosmetics, but CBD isn't mentioned in the Convention for the Narcotics. And in Ireland, CBD isn't mentioned in our Drug Control Act. So the flowering tops of the plant controlled, THC controlled. Extracts from those flowering tops, controlled, but isolated CBD, not controlled.
Right.
So, yeah.
Very interesting.
That's the quick synopsis.
Yeah. And it's very much a kind of moving feast, isn't it? Because things are changing. But yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so as we come sort of towards the end, what are the sort of main challenges in this area? I mean, I think we talked about some of them in terms of regulatory moving of goalposts.
The challenges, moving goalposts for sure. The challenges for me, from an industry standpoint, would be from a cultivation standpoint, starting at the very beginning. What's extremely important, especially in Ireland, is we need better cultivars and strains. So access to cultivars right now, we need to abide by the cultivars that are available to us through the OECD list. Those cultivars may not be the best for growing in Ireland. So we need to be able to access other strains that may have an improved chemistry level or output, or perhaps we would need less inputs, or it could make harvesting better, easier for farmers. From there, in Ireland, there's very few supports for companies that want to work in the hemp cannabis space. Right now, our enterprise body came out with a policy recently that any companies involved in food or cosmetics with cannabinoids or hemp is excluded from any government supports. So it's quite difficult for companies to find their feet. And then moving on from there, the difficulties as, a manufacturer of these products, there's different regs in different jurisdictions. So obviously your formulations may have to change depending on the jurisdiction that you want to export to. And it works both ways. So I've noticed a few American companies that maybe have hemp-derived cosmetic products trying to get registered in Europe and having difficulty because perhaps their formulations don't fit in with what the regs require here in Europe. So there's a couple of hurdles. That's probably 20% of them.
Yeah. I mean, harmonisation is a massive, or lack of harmonisation is a massive barrier to global trade in this area, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And, in Ireland, we have an opportunity here to be, leaders in the production of those starting materials. The agricultural sector here is strong, with a great history. A massive chunk of our land is certified organic, which would be, what people are wanting. But just the lack of regulations and support from government entities is holding people back. Yeah.
Hopefully things will move on soon. But on a more positive note, let's do a bit of crystal ball gazing. Looking to the future, what are the exciting areas of innovation in cosmetics and topicals?
I'd say I'd go back to those three different parts of the puzzle. I'll start with the first, which would be topicals or transdermal applications being applied to medical treatments, and those studies coming to fruition for, say, the epilepsy or arthritis or psoriasis, whatever it may be. As those studies come about, people will recognize those benefits on a larger scale. And, it's funny, once those come to fruition, I think that the stigma associated with cannabis and its compounds is going to dissipate. Then with the second one, for health and wellness, I think when people recognize the power in hemp as a carbon sink and recognize that using hemp and its compounds and its extracts is actually going to help your environment rather than hinder it, we're going to see a lot of people move away from synthetic compounds in their cosmetics and towards compounds that are plant-derived. So that's what I think. There's a movement towards that already. We're seeing it. We're seeing consumers, make sure and check with us that we don't have synthetic products, that everything that we have is plant-based. So it's quite interesting. And then the last one, I suppose, would be the kind of over-the-counter, but say wellness products. So people buying topicals for psoriasis and chronic pain. We're probably going to see an awful lot more of that as products get regulated and, they're on the shelves legitimately.
Lots to come.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Well, that's really good kind of summary on topicals and cosmetics, and it's a big area and there are lots of products out there, but it's good to see you guys taking a very plant-based approach to it. I'll finish with my usual final question, which is, What did your parents say when you told them you were moving into the cannabis industry?
What did they say? Jeez. I think my mother thought I was crazy. And my dad was cool about it because the first person I ever made a topical for was my dad, who has chronic psoriasis.
Right.
And it got rid of it. So, and he actually works with us now. So.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that is a great story. And you can't argue with efficacy, I suppose. So that's...
This is it.
It's brilliant. Cool. Well, thank you, Leah. That's been really... it's been great to find out more about that stuff and what you guys are up to. And I'd love to have you back on in 6 months or so and we can chat about how things are progressing.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Likewise. Take care. Thanks for joining me for that. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did enjoy it, please hit subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use. I'd also love a nice 5-star review on iTunes if you have the time. You can also follow the Cannabis Conversation page on LinkedIn and also sign up to my mailing list via cannabis-conversation.com. Until next week, have a good one.